Hit the lights!
You've discovered the Halfwatt podcast. We want to educate and entertain by tapping into the most trusted source of new technology, the ones installing and innovating it. You, the tradespeople that build from the ground up. Join us as we talk with industry leaders, veteran contractors, and even some young blood.
Welcome aboard. I am super excited today because in the studio with me is one of my most favorite people, Michael Baker.
Good evening. How are you?
Good evening. For all of you who don't know, Michael is his teacher as an instructor. I work with him for IEC and JATC and all that. But that's not how I met him. I met him at my former employer. And we had a funny situation happen when he was interviewing. He said, well, I'm a former Navy nuke MM. And I said, wow, cool. I don't know anything about nuclear propulsion in that realm, but I was on a nuke boat. And he goes, well, I was on this submarine way back when, and tell me some of that, and I'll ad-lib some of that in there.
Well, the nuke school dumped me out into the Pacific Fleet, where my first boat was the Halibut out of Mare Island. And we did some exciting stuff that I still can't talk about.
Yeah.
But I thought that everybody got dumped into a fast attack with exciting missions. And then a couple years later, we decommissioned it, and they transferred me to a Polaris boomer boat. Mm-hmm. And it was the most boring duty ever. Boring.
So as soon as he said halibut, my ears perked up. And I went, wait a minute, that's the boat that went looking for a sunken Soviet submarine.
That's the story, yeah.
Yeah. And so for those of you who don't know, and you can read about it, the book is out, or there's a couple books on it. There was a Soviet hotel-class submarine that surfaced, attempted to fire an ICBM. It was northwest of Hawaii when it did it. And something went awry, and it blew into small pieces and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Mike was a crew member on the submarine that found the other submarine.
Yes, I did. And then we went into the yards and got modified to do some additional research, as it were. And
that information I don't know anything about, but I do know what the original mod was. And I actually saw this submarine years later, before I even knew what it was, in the Philippines, because it has a very peculiar snout on it. And if you look up the USS Halibut, you'll see that the snout looks totally different than any other submarine you're ever going to see.
We called it the Bat Cave.
When I saw it in the Philippines, I had no idea what it was. And I wound up looking it up in a Jane's book, which is a shipboard guide. And, of course, that was for the Regulus missiles at the time.
Right.
And I think when I saw the sub, it had been converted to a SEAL type vehicle.
It was purpose-built nuclear Regulus missile boat, hence the Bat Cave. And then it went back into the yards to be converted to SSN. It had been SSGN. They got rid of the the Regulus, mm-hmm. and then outfitted it for the additional research that we were sent on that I still can't talk about.
That he still can't talk about. I could probably talk more about it than he can, because he was actually on the boat and sworn to secrecy. I've read the book about it. And if you look up USS Halibut on the great inner tubes, you too can read about what it did, and then you can tell Mike, because he didn't know. He wasn't a real literary. We laughed about that. I says, oh my God, the Halibut, it did this, it did that. He goes, really? I was in the engine room the whole time.
Taking care of the reactor.
I
think the best book written about all of those exploits was called Blind Man's Bluff.
Oh, man. That book is jaw-dropping. That is a jaw-dropping good book.
Yeah, it was a good book.
So now, obviously this podcast leans heavy towards the Navy, right? I mean, Mike is my second nuke I've had on the show. Our mutual friend is also when he was an electrician, right? Or I guess he was an electrician's mate. And so I'm not trying to interview folks from the Air Force or the Army or other branches, but it just happens that the Navy on the West Coast is pretty big, and a lot of us get our technical training in there.
Yep.
But anyway, I just think it was super exciting, and Mike and I hit it right off when we talked about that and realized that I at least was aware of what he had done in his time on the halibut. And of course, you eventually, how long did you spend in? 6 years?
6 years.
And what'd you do when you got out?
Well, I was headed to Lewis and Clark College to finish my degree in nuclear engineering, but I got sidetracked by the Oregon Electrical Apprenticeship Program.
No kidding.
Yep.
Hooked you right in, huh?
A buddy of mine from high school had become an electrical contractor, and he had a job that had him underwater. He just needed bodies to help finish. So I volunteered while I was waiting for school to start. And unfortunately, school started before the contract ran out. So I just cooled my heels, and then another contractor on that job called me and offered me a job.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So do you have a super low?
429.
429. This is number 429 in the LEA program, folks. 429. To give you a comparison, I'm 4062, I think is what my number is. So I'm only about 3,500 people behind you. That's what a novice I am at this. No way.
They actually changed the name of the license since I got in.
Yeah.
From JLE to LEA.
And when I took the JLE, because I came out with the Navy experience, and they said, well, what did you do? I said, I did this. I checked off like 5 of the 10 endorsements. And like an idiot, I should have just checked off all 10. Oh, yeah. I can do this. Well, yeah. I checked off what I knew I could do. I could do some minor boiler controls.
Could have got your J.
So they said, well, you can't just convert into LEA. You got to go back to school. Yeah. So I did. But I liked moving from the military into the civilian electrical world, but I didn't transition nearly as quickly as you did. It took me, I had to bounce off of a few walls first.
I tried.
So you started working with these gentlemen, and how did that work out?
Well, I enjoyed it. I was the new kid, the apprentice, so I got sent out on what the journeyman thought was a crappy job, and that is service and troubleshoot fire alarm systems, which they hated. Mm-hmm. And because of my Navy training and being on a submarine, you can't put that stuff off. You have to fix it or sink and die.
What's your choice here?
Yeah, no choice. Fix it. And I enjoyed the sense of satisfaction at the end of the day that I'd gotten the job done, and if it was an existing system, had gotten it righted, and we could dismiss the fire watch. I just enjoyed it. Nice.
And what brand was it at that time?
Mostly over-the-counter stuff. Silent Night, back when Hochiki was doing over-the-counter conventional. Mm-hmm. I can't remember some of the other brands that we dealt with. Nothing like Edwards or anything proprietary until later in my career.
Mm-hmm. And then eventually you went into Miracom, correct?
Yeah, I went to Miracom in 2002 and taught their network system as it rolled out in the U.S.
So let's cover between when you got into the trade. When was that? When did you actually get in then?
78.
Wow, 1978. I was still in high school. Yeah, I just had started high school at that time in 78. Because I got out in 82, so I would have been in California, so I would have been in junior high. I would have been in 9th grade in junior high because we only had a three grade high school. I was going to Washington Junior High in 1978. That's how What a young pup I was. So you got into the fire alarm gig then, and did you work for several companies in Oregon before you went back to California?
I worked for a company on McLaughlin who's since disappeared. Yeah, I did that for about 2 years and then started my own contracting company.
Oh, no kidding.
Subcontracting mainly for small rural telephone companies who didn't have the licensing required to do the work.
Huh. So you have a lot of experience in running your own show too.
Yeah, I do.
Huh.
I do.
I didn't know. I did not know that.
Yeah, it was small. We'd have between 5 and 10 employees at a time, and then National Guardian bought my company and hired me back as a branch manager. I did that for 10 years, and then I retired.
No kidding.
Somebody told me you can't get out of the industry. This was in '96, I think. And they were right. I could not get out of the industry.
So what happened when you retired? I mean, did you just hang around? And...
It was the first time in my life I had time and money, so my wife and I took all of our kids to Disneyland, and when I ran out of money, I went back and looked for a job.
Kids buy all the Disney stuff you want. Yeah, crap. I'm out of money. I got to go back to work. Where'd you go then?
ProTech, Andy Schwartz.
Nice.
And that's when I was introduced to Edwards and Mike Matthias and EST2 and 3 and that sort of stuff. And then from RFI, I believe I went to Denver and worked for Denver Fire Alarm.
Oh, no kidding.
For a couple of years. He was a game wheel dealer.
Mm-hmm. So you've worked on almost every brand. Did you ever work on Simplex equipment?
No.
That's probably the one you haven't worked on.
The only one I haven't worked on. So before I die, maybe I'll lynch a job for JCI.
Come up in the hill and
I'll
show you some Simplex equipment. It's
cool.
It's fun equipment. It really is.
I've always heard that it's quality equipment.
It's really quality equipment, and usually you don't bang your head against the wall too hard on the things you run into.
Right.
Like the problem we just had, I was telling you about in the car on the way here, or the truck on the way here, was a programming thing. It wasn't hardware. It was, and when I did all the swaps to see if I can get this thing to work, I was like, well, the only thing left is, change the type of point it is and see if it'll work. And that's exactly what they had to do, and that solved the problem. So for some reason it had worked before, and then it just kind of righted itself up and said, I shouldn't be doing this, and it stopped doing it, which is kind of bizarre.
Yeah, it is.
Made us think maybe it was possessed for a second.
Right.
But
that's what the Navy teaches you, is that step-by-step methodical troubleshooting method.
It's crazy. It's crazy good. I sat in a room with 3 of these fire panels on my last day at work earlier this week, and for 7 or 8 hours working on different ways of solving it. And eventually I came to the conclusion that I had to change the programming. And when I did that, if you do in the network programmer, the Simplex network programmer, if you make a change that will affect other nodes, it'll tell you. You just did that. You just made a mistake. Well, you didn't make a mistake, but now if you make this change, you also have to affect this node, this node, this node on the network. And I made the change, and I went, yep, this one, all 3 of these have to be done, plus this one. And I looked at my watch, and I went, oh, my God, I'm up against the clock. I'm completely up against the wall. I have no choice. And so I said, I better call for help. So I reached up and grabbed the yellow and black handles and pulled and punched. And we had Simplex come out, and the tech sat down, and he called me, and we talked, and he goes, yeah, I'm going to have to do exactly that. And he did it. And I told you my apprentice, who I just can't, I just think the world of this guy, just knocked it out of the park. Just stood up and knocked it out of the park with the Simplex guy and got it fixed. And then they, and last text I got from him was, we're up and running.
Nice.
So, which is what we want,
right?
Ultimately. But that idea of sitting and troubleshooting and noodling and looking at different things is exactly what the Navy taught me. It was like, well, do I have another piece of hardware I could swap out? Yes, I do.
Right. Complete
replacement. Swap the hardware. Did anything change? Problem still didn't change. It's got to be software. Check that off, I did all my research, and I said, yeah, the only thing left is this. And what it was there's a pseudo point, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so, for those of you who don't know what a pseudo point is in a fire alarm system, it's a reference in software. So I can point to a location in software and say, well, if the state of this point is on or off, it will affect an equation behind it. So we reference that point and we pivot the equation around that point. The pseudo point was labeled as a utility. And I knew if I made it a fire point versus a utility, it would then do what I needed it to do.
Right.
Why it was doing it before, we don't know.
Who cares?
But now it wasn't.
Right.
And I said, we got to make it a fire point. And of course, when I made it a fire point, it affected all these other nodes, and I ran out of time. I should have done that. Hindsight's 2020.
Yep.
If I had come in the morning and made that a fire point right off the bat and downloaded the system, it wouldn't have the service
Exactly.
call, right?
Never know.
But that's not the way life goes.
No.
And you go, no, it's got to be something stupid like a got to be a hardware issue. This thing's even phone lines. Like
right.
I thought it's and my apprentice says, no, man, the thing's calling out. It's calling troubles. It can't be calling troubles and not fires. What the hell's wrong with this thing? Sure enough, put my butt set on it, pull the battery lead, man, thing dials out like that. I'm like, what's going on with it? Don't cry. But yeah, it's I've come to really enjoy it. But you worked on, so am I saying Mircom? Is that right? Or is it?
Yeah, that's what I call Mircom.
Mircom is a lot like EST, isn't it?
It is. It looks like they copycatted a lot of stuff from Edwards.
And is the compile the same? Like the program is pretty much the same, or is it a different beast?
Well, from seeing the two side by side, I'd say the Mircom product is a newer version of the EST3.
Really?
Yeah, because it came out in, I don't know, I went to work for them in 2002, and that's when we rolled it out. But EST3 had already been out in the market for several years by then. So I think what they did is they just put new lipstick on a pig and taught me how to use it, and then I went out and taught everybody else how to use it.
So when we had Gary on the show and we talked to him, and of course he's a guru of 3, I never asked him anything about, the Kidda, or because I know he's familiar with some of the Kidda product.
Right.
I'm sure, I don't know if he's ever worked on the Mircom product, but Kidda, like the VM and the VS, very similar to the 3.
Yeah, and I think there might be some Mircom platform issues buried in there somewhere, because they sold their prior company to Edwards. I'm trying to remember the name of it. I can't remember, but I think Kidda took some of that from that product before Mircom sold it to Edwards.
Oh, no kidding.
And Edwards used it as a platform not only for existing distributors from Mircom, but also to move people along into the EST 2 and 3.
Okay.
And
It's
now
a-
4.
It's a good product though. It really, really is. Once I learned Edwards and enough of it to know how it operated, I never was a serious technician on it. I was pretty impressed with what it could do.
Right.
If its interface was more simplex like, where you can walk up to a simplex panel and once you know how they operate, they're like, oh my God, this is super, super simple.
Right.
But it's the learning of it that takes a
Yes.
little bit. When I walked up to an EST panel before I worked for PSI, I was like, what is this thing going to tell me? Because it's not standard,
No.
right? And then when I got to know Bryce and I got to know some of the programming, he's like, yeah, these things don't know what the hell they are when you open them up. They have no idea what they are. You have to teach them everything.
Yep.
And I thought, well, that's interesting. That makes that very versatile,
Yes.
but also makes it very fragile.
Yes.
And if your technician isn't thinking, like way ahead, hey, let's put these service groups in, let's make sure this thing can be controlled. It's like driving a car without a steering wheel. You
Right.
can do it, but you may fall off the road.
Yeah. And people like Gary get a hold of it and they try to make it more elegant by removing some of the routines, which makes it run better. It makes more sense. But if you don't have that level of knowledge and you're trying to troubleshoot it, it makes for a long day.
I bet.
Without him.
Yeah, without him. Now that I've worked on the Simplex graphic system, that's called a TSW. It used to be GCC when I first worked on them. Now they're called TSWs. And I've seen the fireworks side of the house. When I looked at the fireworks, I kind of, like, it was not foreign to me, but watching how it was built and how it was put together, and then leaving and going up to the hill and then working on the TSW, it's like, because I do a lot of programming. I sit on my butt a lot and putting stuff together. And so I've been dialing in these TSWs to get them better and higher performing and working a little bit more efficiently. And I'm able to make the screens for the inspectors, like the way they want them.
Right.
Not the way I think they should be. What the hell do I know? Right? Honestly, I'm not the guy working the machine. I'm just the guy fixing it and maintaining it. But I can make it better for the technicians, or the inspectors. So I'm like, tell me what you want. And they're like, well, we want this. Okay. Oh my God, can you make it do that? Sure.
Right.
Can you make it do that? Well, sure. So now it's a matter of me customizing it for them.
Right.
And I feel a lot of satisfaction that I never felt before in a gig, because I'm able to, what is going to make you happy? Well, I want it to be pink. Okay. Pink it is. Oh, man. Well, it's so you work for Miracom, and so you had to kind of know the minutia of these things too. You had to get into the nuts and bolts of them, right? I mean,
I did. As you know, when you're teaching a class, you have to know a little bit more than your class. Otherwise, they'll just eat your sack lunch. So I had to spend a great deal of time learning how to put together a program and how to network panels and how to globally transmit changes to programs, which
really?
They do a really good job of, so that I can hook up to any node in the network and broadcast all of the changes that affect the network up to, I think it's 63 nodes.
Wow. That's big.
It is. And it's, as compared to Edwards, it's wicked fast.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Well, so their protocol is different than Edwards.
It is.
Huh.
Yeah.
Is it Ethernet based, or is it all like RS-485, or?
It's a combination of 485 and Ethernet, and you can switch back and forth between them. So you can have a 485 connection between two nodes and then Ethernet between the rest of the nodes.
So it doesn't have to be just one media type.
No, It's either or both. And you can use that method throughout the network. So if you come up with a Class A fiber network, of course, that's the best way to go for speed.
Mm-hmm. No kidding. I had no idea.
And their graphics package is far and away the best I've ever seen. It's akin to a 3D model floating in space. So you can create, with CAD drawings, buildings, campuses, and if there's nothing going on, you just see this sort of helicopter fly around of this 3D campus. And you can even overlay a Google map so you can see bushes and roads and whatnot. And then if something were to happen, the event would come slowly, rotate slowly to the operator in 2D. So you'd see this building present itself by itself, and then the fire area within that building. So the programming we were doing with their graphics interface was for the fire department, because these were typically like a VA center with 50 buildings, and you would plant the monitor in the dispatch center. Mm-hmm. So we built its response to events to satisfy the dispatcher.
No kidding.
Yeah.
I had no idea. And so it would unfold and show, it would change its graphics and then go right into where the fire floor is and then drop a 2D image of the...
Exactly. And it would show the fire area probably includes more than one device. Wow. But you just see the devices that are affected in that, there's a term for it that the industry uses, that fire area.
So it's all dynamic. It's all dynamic. Driven. No kidding.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got to see that.
Yeah, if you see it set up at an expo, I encourage you to take a close look at it and play around. It's pretty cool.
Huh. Well, now I feel like I'm still clanking stones again. Holy cow.
I had no idea, because my goal in life has been to, one of my mentors in college said, to push yourself out of your comfort zone. So if a job comes along that you've never held before, Murakami manufacturer, then jump into it and learn everything you can learn about it. But doing so leaves you in a vacuum as compared to Simplex in this case. Edwards. I didn't learn Edwards until after Murakami. So I had no idea how good Murakami's graphics interface was as compared to Fireworks until I started using Fireworks.
Got it. Yeah, and the same thing with the Simplex one. I've always dealt with the GCC and now the TSW, and it's got some okay graphics. There's nothing wrong with them. They're nothing like that though.
Yeah.
Because remember when Honeywell had the FS90?
Yeah.
So the Honeywell had the first real computer graphic interface I'd ever seen. And they had one at Good Samaritan Hospital. So I was working for Simplex and I was testing all the legacy facilities when they had the 4 main legacy facilities. Now they have Salmon Creek added. So the Honeywell was at the Good Sam one. So we started looking at it and the Honeywell tech was there and he's like, well, it's really easy because if you find like a smoke detector, then the graphics weren't that complicated. But they were nice overhead graphics with solid colors. And then, I says, well, what if the smoke detector is really over here? And he goes, oh, well, you go here, 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 and then you move it. X, Y coordinates, you just move it to where you want it to. Because we don't have drag and drop quite yet. It's not coming. So the kid that was working for me at Simplex, his name was Jerry Turner. He's now an IT guy working for another company. It took him minutes to figure this out. I mean, he was super computer savvy. Matter of fact, he taught me Windows 3.11 because I certainly didn't know it.
Wow.
I'd come from
You're
DOS.
old.
Yeah, I am old. I have a pull start computer. So he was the one that, taught me how to use Windows because when Simplex gave me a computer, I went, what the hell do I do with this? Crack nuts with it? I don't know what I'm going to do with this thing. And so he showed me all that stuff. Well, he got into the graphics and he could really manipulate the graphics quickly. So I would come and find these changes, and then he would make all the changes. The Honeywell tech, who was let go by Honeywell and then rehired as an independent contractor. That's how Honeywell shook off all their employees and hired them back, right? So he was coming back making 3 times more, but no insurance. Going, well, I don't know what the hell I'm doing here. So he'd come and do all these changes. He goes, my God, there's nothing to do. So he would do the other things, and he taught us enough to be dangerous with it. And we had a hell of a good time learning that system and figuring it out. I was like, yeah, because not every FS90 had it. It was just, a package that you could add. And I thought, yeah, this is an all right thing. I could get into that. And then Simplex came out with their network and then their graphics stuff. And then, of course, I kind of learned all that. And then when I went to work for The Hill the first time, they had already had it ready to go, and Chris Crombie, who's the guy I worked with up there, pieced it all together. And then Chris taught me and a guy named Tom Ashford how to work on these things because we didn't know. We were both like, oh, what is it that we do here kind of thing. So he helped us, figure out what we were doing. But, and that was my whole experience. I hadn't seen anything else. I'd never seen a fireworks system. There's a notifier one. I'd never, the Johnson Controls has it's like a notifier, but it's a Johnson Controls label on it. They have one of those out at the Kaiser on the west side. I saw how that graphic thing worked. I thought, well, that's pretty cool.
It is pretty cool.
You get to see all the different stuff with these,
Right.
but you could definitely see where a manufacturer has a specific idea in mind. But what you're talking about with that's cool. Like, that's like Siemens type stuff,
Right.
where their
Right.
graphics are like, whoa.
Well, the youngest brother of the family that owns Mercom has an electrical engineering degree, and he pretty much does whatever he wants. And one year he thought he and his engineers would come up with a product to win some award in Chicago, and that graphics program won it.
No kidding.
That's what drove him.
Huh. I love that stuff. That really appeals to me. When somebody goes out and designs. When I was in the military, we had a one particular radio in my last command that was called a CN520. It's just, no one had ever seen them before or since. They were made by Motorola, and they had stopped making them years before I ever got to this command. And they were a big radio. They were not a small. They were a high output UHF radio. So I go to Scottsdale for the Navy to go to Motorola, the plant, to look at a deception machine they had there. So I'm TAD to Motorola, and I meet an engineer who's working on this new product, and I happen to mention these older radios, and he's this CN520Ns. What the hell are you guys doing with those? He goes, that was like my first, I worked on the modem of those. It was my first project for Motorola was building the modem for those things. He goes, the Norwegians are the only ones who have those radios. What are you doing with those? I says, I don't know, but we have them, and I want to know why it costs like $1,200 for the cards when we blow it up. He goes, I'll tell you why. We got to make them from scratch. That's why. He goes, let me show you. Let's take a walk. So he takes me out on the plant floor, and he goes, this is what replaced that. At that time, it was a ground pounder radio. It was called an LST-5B. And it's this tiny little thing. I think we're being invaded. It was this tiny little thing. And I says, that's it? He goes, oh, this thing's, and he rattles off all of what it can do. And he's showing me how it's getting tested. He goes, that's a radio. He goes, honestly, the thing you've got is so old that when you tell us you need a card, they were milled out of aluminum.
Wow.
The base card was aluminum. He goes, we have to actually go out and subcontract the milling of that to make the card. And then we build the substrates on top of that. And then we add all the PC boards. And the aluminum is a heat sink for it.
Right.
And then we piece it all together. And it takes us about a month to make one. And he goes, we have to make one. Every time we have to make one, I'm the engineer that gets called, I know, because I'm the one that helps oversee the. And I just went, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. I said, so you're building a modem? You built the modem for that? He goes, well, I build modems for a living, but here's the modem I'm building for this new radio. And then he showed me what he's doing and how he's doing it. And I just went, well, this guy's like my hero. I mean, he's sitting here in a lab with all this equipment, and he's noodling ways to make this thing better. And I'm the guy on the other end breaking it.
Right.
Oh, plug into this. Which is exactly why we blew the card the last one, because I plugged the wrong thing in and smoke fell out of it. I mean, smoke poured out of this machine. I went, oh no. But I could see that, though, having the resources to noodle, and it's like those ham radio guys I know that sit there and they'll doodle out a radio and then they'll go build it.
Right.
And I'm like, how the hell did you do that? Like,
step one.
I'll go take mud out of my horse's hoof now. That's all I'm good for.
Make some paste.
Yeah. So you worked for Mircom and taught. So you've got experience in front of students. And how long did you worked for them for a decade, or?
I worked for AFAA for 10 years and then Mercom for 8 years.
Wow.
Traveling the country. And AFAA was more codes and standards. Mercom was more product.
So AFAA is the group, it's the association, right?
Right.
Yeah.
I was their training director from 2002 to 2012.
And did you travel with them too? I guess
Yeah.
you'd have to.
Yeah.
Huh.
I had a lot of fun. My wife had a lot of fun.
Did she work for him too, or did she?
No.
She
No.
just kind of hung out.
She just picked. She cherry picked the trips. She'll go to New Orleans, but she won't go to Wichita.
That's funny. So with AFAA, because I was a part of that group for a while. I've been to some of their meetings. So what does a director of training do? I mean, what do you do there for?
Well, trying to remember names here. Mario Guidon, Larry Tate, and I started back then it was called the Northwest AFA. And we started building a clientele and selling training, and head office got interested, so they came out to see how I was doing. And they had an executive director, Larry Neibauer, who was about to retire. And the training director at the time, Tom Hammerberg, was going to take his spot, and they were looking for somebody to take Tom's spot. Mm-hmm. So I learned from Tom how to write or update curricula for updates to 70 and 72 and 101 and help people get ready for NICET and that sort of stuff. And then I would travel about 40 to 45 weeks a year.
Wow.
Yeah, a lot.
Yeah, and you're nice at level 4. I don't know if I've mentioned that or not, folks, but Mike's a nice at level 4. So I mean, we're not dealing with a guy who doesn't know his stuff.
And it was a lot of fun. And then with Muricom, I learned the product. Went to Toronto for a couple of weeks. Learned the network product called FlexNet. And once I learned it, then they released it to the U.S. market and sent me on my merry way to train their distributors. They had some offices, maybe half a dozen offices in the country. And I would either go to those offices to provide training on the product, because we would have equipment up on the wall, kind of like you and I deal with. And then I'd also be sent out. I like to say they pimped me out to do code and standard updates locally at a dealer who is large enough to just pay a flat rate and have me go to someplace in southern Louisiana and bring people up to speed on codes and standards.
No kidding.
That was a lot of fun too.
I bet.
Not quite as much travel, more like 35 weeks a year.
So you've really, I mean, in all your years of work, you've done a lot of traveling across the country. So you've seen a lot of different jurisdictions and a lot of different. I mean, what do you think of Oregon versus like Louisiana or Texas or Illinois?
The first thing that struck me a long time ago was that once I got out of the Navy and into the apprenticeship program, I thought that this was the way it was all over the country. And then I went to California, and it's not. So I'd say with regard to licensing, Oregon leads the pack as far as licensing requirements and the apprenticeship program and on-the-job training and so on and so forth. When it comes to building code requirements, it really depends upon what the local hazards are. Like Las Vegas has a pretty difficult building code to deal with for contractors because of the tragedy that they've suffered over time. Mm-hmm. Miami-Dade County in Florida is in that mix. Los Angeles is in there. So it really depends upon which city you're talking about. Okay. And then there are some progressive fire marshals, fire prevention chiefs like Mike Six up in Bremerton, believe it or not, little podunk Bremerton. He's pretty progressive when it comes to that sort of thing, even though it's a small community. So
the enforcement piece can really dictate how the community is going to, whether it's going to have a safe.
That's a good point. Good question. It's one thing to write more strenuous building code requirements, but it's quite another to enforce compliance. And to me, there's a big gap there. Not everywhere, just in certain parts of the country.
Well, we can see it here locally,
Oh, yeah.
and I'm not going to pick on any jurisdictions, but I've been to jurisdictions here within the, the Tri-County area where you're like, what?
Yeah.
What the hell's going on here? Or just outside. And then I've been to other jurisdictions where it's like,
Well,
they're pounding the ground like a tent peg.
Recently, the John Hancock Tower center floors 2025 somewhere in there burnt out because there was no sprinkler system. It was residential. And somebody somewhere got permission from the local jurisdiction to omit sprinklers
No kidding.
in those R-use groups.
No kidding.
That's the kind of stuff that just infuriates me.
Yeah. It's like when that apartment in London, in England, burned, where the siding was super, super flammable.
Right.
And then you watch the whole thing go up and you're like, what the hell's going on here? Doesn't everybody... there was a casino in Puerto Rico that burned. It burned for like 5 days. And no sprinklers, right? No nothing.
Nope.
Burned completely all the way down to nothing. It took it 5 days to finally go. And I was just like, wow. You just don't have life safety as a primary concern in certain jurisdictions.
And not to pick on people, but Las Vegas fire in the... back in
MGM Grand?
MGM Grand,
Yeah.
they got permission to omit sprinklers on the first floor because it's ugly.
Uh-huh.
And, of course, it's hard enough to get people out of a casino anyway, but to omit sprinklers and then allow the damage that was caused, I think that resulted in a 10 to 12 very specific changes to the building code.
I remember when that hit. Because remember, that was when the smoke was piling out of the elevator shafts, and they're like, what the hell's going on here? We need to figure this
Smoke
out.
and gas was free to run throughout the building.
They found people in their rooms dead from carbon monoxide poisoning. No smoke, no odor, no nothing. Just laying on their beds dead because they couldn't get out of the rooms, and the gas came in, killed them, and left.
Yeah.
And
An old, I hate to date him, but Fred Simmons was an electrical inspector in Washington County. I think he worked mainly at Nike. He's probably retired now, but we talked about how that's a huge problem. It's not new construction necessarily. He says he believes that inspectors do a great job of inspecting for proper fire stopping because, the IT people want to just use a hammer to make a hole and then shove a wad of cables from room to room. He said that problem has been addressed, and they do a good job of requiring that you reveal all of these so-called firewalls to ensure that they've been patched, fire stopped properly. The problem exists after the fact. Once you get the C of O, you end up with these tenants who hire their brother-in-law to install a network system, not knowing what sort of damage they're doing to the building. They're just punching holes and pulling cable.
Yep. So we ran into that with Washington State, where the state fire marshal would come down and say, okay, especially in the care facilities, and say, hey, we're going to do a comprehensive test here. We want to know, for example, on your cook hood, why are you using, 360-degree links? Prove it. Like, what was this system designed to do? And he's right. He's not wrong. If you put in too high of a temperature link, it won't trip, or a 450 link, and it won't go until it trips too late. Then you get other issues because, the suppression systems that are gone. So he pushed for that. He pushed for fire smoke damper testing. He pushed for other types of testing. And then Oregon picked up on that quickly. And so we're going to do the same thing. So it turns out that, unbeknownst to me, Washington, who I have a love-hate relationship with a lot of stuff that goes on, mostly in Vancouver. Yeah. But I'm over it, kind of. But anyway, but in Washington, where they have they happen to be on the cutting edge, and then Oregon picked that up and went, we're going to do the same thing. So we're going to stop looking at individual pieces, and we're going to look at the thing as a whole, which was a stroke of brilliance to go, he's absolutely right. And so the Nick, the main fire marshal up there that I was dealing with in Washington, just like the guy in Bremerton is setting an example, and other people are following in behind him going, this guy's got his act together, and we should be doing the same thing. And you're absolutely right. It should be a comprehensive look. The same way the Joint Commission or the DNV looks at a hospital, says, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Show me that your dampers work.
Right.
Show me that your penetrations are there. Show me that you're maintaining firewall. Show me that your doors are closing correctly. Show me that the seals are. Show me that all this stuff. Stop BSing me. Show me that it works. And show me that it works because your own people are proving that. Like ISO. Are you following the rules that you've set or not? That's what we're here to do. We're here to validate that you're actually following your own
Instead of looking at stickers on equipment, they're doing a performance-based test of the whole system, the entire system.
It definitely, in my going back to the Hill, I definitely see, because when I was there before, you were just exactly what you're talking about. We would blow holes through walls and didn't think anything of it. And then one day someone looked above the ceiling and went, I think this was supposed to be a firewall. It looks like Swiss cheese. So they hired a contractor to come through, and 10,000 penetrations later, they've got them all closed and everything's all done, and I thought, now I go back there, you open up the ceiling tile first you just can't do it without having a HEPA card anyway, but you open up a ceiling tile and it's all cataloged. You punch a hole in there, we know. Like they take that game very serious. Same thing with dampers, So I was pretty shocked to go back to see have left OHSU and then go back and go, whoa. I mean, in the time I was gone, they didn't just step up their game a little; they stepped up their game a lot.
That's good.
And it matched like what Kaiser does, and what Legacy does, and because Kaiser don't mess around.
No.
Kaiser's on their game. They've always been on their game. They've always been ahead of the curve. And now I like to think, we're catching up to the guys who, because when I was building Heart, which was an amateur radio group that we originally started up on the Hill, the Loma Prieta earthquake and the earthquakes that hit in San Francisco, I don't think that was Loma Prieta. I could be wrong, but Kaiser. Like if you listen to some of the tapes of the repeater traffic in San Francisco when that was going on, you get an idea of just how bad an earthquake is and how terrible things go in short order. And the last time I was involved in an earthquake there, I was out to sea on a destroyer when the one hit where the Bay Bridge collapsed from the upper down to the lower deck. And so we had folks on board that ship who had family in San Francisco, Alameda. And matter of fact, we used our HF radios. You weren't in that thing in the Navy, but we had what they call URT-23s, which could put out a lot of power. Man, we dialed everything in and got them up on the ham bands so that we could at least get some Mars traffic back and satisfy some of the crew members who, to at least talk to the family and see if they were alive, what the hell was going on. But then coming back and looking at it, I was, and kind of being a part of it, we then looked at Kaiser San Francisco because they were so far ahead of the game there in dealing with emergency communications and what they did. That we model a lot of what we did after them.
Wow.
And now, being in and out of the hospital game and back in, it's a different world.
Right.
In all the years you've been in the fire industry, and it's quite a few of them, what have been some of the changes you've liked that you've seen over all the time? I mean, starting in 78, it's now 2022. That's a pretty long career.
I really appreciate the work the manufacturers have done to reduce the incidence of nuisance alarm, and they continue to work in that regard. It's easier to troubleshoot now with computer-based controllers, which I appreciate, troubleshooting systems. The states that enforce compliance with regard to the building code and to licensing is a good thing. It's not moving quickly enough, in my opinion, but that sometimes that can get bogged down in politics.
So when you went to like Louisiana, for example, and I used to make fun of Louisiana until I figured out, because my family's all there, but until I figured out that their fire compliance, they don't mess around because it's an all petroleum-based state, right?
Things go bang really fast.
Yeah, but even in their kitchen hoods and their fire extinguishers, if you don't have the right color tag hanging on your kitchen hood in New Orleans, they'll shut you down.
Right.
Just like that. Yep. Just like that. I had no idea that their fire compliance was super, super strict.
Right.
I just assumed, you know what that means.
On the other hand, Hawaii Fire Department especially they used to be sort of handicapped because the building code is what it is, and it's very difficult for the state legislature to move off of that dime. So the fire department, when you ask them questions like, what about Chinatown? I can't go into Chinatown. It scares the crap out of me. I think it's going to burn to the ground in 5 seconds. And they said all they can do is wait for it to burn to the ground in 5 seconds.
No kidding.
Yeah, that's all that they can hope for.
So sometimes the just the ability to move codes and make things safer for people is almost gridlocked.
It is, and it shouldn't be, because the building code gives the building official the wherewithal to take steps to make buildings safe when people are in harm. The politics prevents that from happening.
No kidding. So it really does put people's lives at risk.
I would say yes.
Huh.
New construction, on the other hand, it's a different matter, but it's the existing stuff like International Marketplace, Chinatown, and other local venues, touristy venues, are difficult to get change.
No kidding. I did not know that. So that's like looking at a higher level of what happens in fire, because I've always been in the tactical realm, like always, this system, this building, these people, this stuff,
right.
Dealing with this one system. But I've never really thought, like, strategically how this stuff applies. Like when the folks that are involved with code, writing codes on a higher level, or code committees, and my highest achievement in that realm, and we talked about on the way here, was just to sit on the A&T committee for IEC for a year and get your eyes open to just how some of the other states are woefully behind, but where they're at.
That's probably why I feel the way I do, because I was on a NFPA code committee for 7 or 8 years, and you just hear about tragedy after tragedy after tragedy, and it just gets old after a while. And I even worked on the Oregon Fire Code Committee for, a couple code cycles before I moved away.
No kidding. So you were originally from Portland? Is that where you were born at? Born and raised here, and
joined the military and came and went. And
came back.
Came back eventually because my wife needs help to take care of me, and all of our kids live here, so it's just a no-brainer to move back here.
Mm-hmm. I like it. I like it here. I really do.
I used to like it here.
Well, I do. I like it over Southern California. So I'm from Southern California essentially, but I've been living up here now since '91. So it's like I'm pretty much one of them. Don't key my car, but yeah, it's it's kind of a different feeling up here.
Right. There is a lot to do if you have a family, fishing and camping and whatnot. But the politics have just gone nuts.
It is a little wonky. and it seems to be in our little area too. It seems to be pretty a lot of upset people running around our neck of the woods.
Yes, there are.
I don't quite get that yet, but it is what it is.
Yeah.
I move forward, and I happen to run in a lot of circles where folks have a different opinion than me, so I just have to put a big smile on my face, put my hat over my head, and shut up.
Smile and wave.
Yeah, I mean, what else? There's not a whole lot I can do.
Yeah.
So I can't change any of this stuff.
No.
And in all the years, I'm much younger than you, but in all the years we've been living, I've not made a change. I've not been able to change a bloody thing.
No.
And that's all. Honestly, even when I worked up in the Hill the first time, I wrote letters and wrote my congressperson a lot, filed FOIA, did all these different things. I had a stack on my cube about an inch thick of all the letters I had sent to and from my elected representatives from top to bottom,
right,
including all the way to the president. I didn't change a bloody thing, Mike. No, not a damn thing.
But it's therapeutic.
It was therapeutic. I stopped doing it, but you're right. And when people would come in my area and bitch and moan, I could point to it.
Yeah, at least I'm doing something.
At least I did that. I thought that with social media, I knew I could if I just wrote the right tweet or the right this or the right that, I could affect a change. But that turned out to be bullshit too. So,
Yep.
Which is sad. So as you get to the twilight of your career, and you're still working. I mean, now you're working for your son, right? You're helping him out.
Well, not working per se. I just waste time on his truck.
Wasting time with him.
Yeah, distraction. And then he had emergency surgery, blew out his. You take note of this.
Okay.
He's 44. He had diverticulitis and it blew out. It ruptured.
No
and
kidding.
He ended up in the hospital for 2 weeks. So you might want to do something about that.
No kidding.
Yeah. We thought he was dead.
Wow. What is it? Was it a specific thing he ate that did that to him?
They really can't tell what causes it in the first place. But once you have it, and that seems to be a function of age, that you just have to take care to avoid infection. That's what really screwed him up.
Oh, man. Now I got to eat. Now I can't eat any more nuts.
At the end of the day, it's partially his fault because he had pain for 2 weeks before he told his wife.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah.
Oh.
And then, of course, I went in for surgery, and we were both recovering at about the same time. So we're actually trying to put together a camping trip because our camping this year got all botched up. And I was joking with my wife about how he and I are going to be out there in our walkers trying to move a trailer.
For all the things that are going on, you've got the right attitude.
You can either laugh or cry.
And on all the time I've known you, I think I've known you for about 2 years now. I think we met about 2.5 years ago, maybe a little bit longer than that. You've always got a smile on your face, despite all the bad squeeze you've gone through and are going through. Even tonight. I mean, you're clearly in pain, but you're smiling and you're moving your way through it. I just really appreciate that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I think it's what's keeping you going forward.
It is. That's what my doc says.
That's the way to move, man. Yeah. Well, and you're not, and you just literally just stopped working.
Yeah.
Professionally just a few months ago. So you're not. I mean, you're no spring chicken, Mike. Let's be honest with you, brother.
No, I had. I've been fighting cancer for 3 years now. They took my bladder, my. What do you call it? Another organ, and then for a year I was on chemo, and I was cancer-free when I met you. Mm-hmm. And then they took me off chemo. After about a year of that, I got it in my kidney. Oh. So this August 15th, they took my kidney and my urethra, And like I was telling my wife, there's not much else I can give them.
Yeah, it really isn't. But you're smiling and you're moving your way through it.
Yeah.
And it is what it is.
Try to keep a good attitude.
Well, I think it's gotten you this far.
Yeah.
Honestly.
Yeah.
Do you, in all the time that you spent in the military and the 6 years you spent around reactors, do you think that had something to do with it?
I'm convinced of it. In the most recent act called, I can't remember anything anymore, but they recently passed an act that essentially puts me under some sort of umbrella where I don't have to prove that what I did with nuclear reactors was a cause of kidney cancer. So I'm working with my VSO, and of course when you deal with the VA, nothing comes quickly.
Right.
But I'm confident it'll happen sooner or later.
It's probably it's probably the right thing.
Yeah.
I mean, because especially as an MM, I mean, you got your hands.
And
on
I
it.
was an ELT. I was babysitting the reactor continuously.
Yeah. A lot of neutron exposure. I mean,
Yeah.
honestly. I mean, and for those of you who are not familiar with what an MM is a machinist mate. So in the nuke ratings, there were electronics technicians, machinist mates, and electricians mates. So Sean was an EM, right? My other nuke. And he operated, the systems and the electrical systems that maintained the reactor. Mike actually operated the mechanical stuff.
Took care of the chemistry.
Yep, handled it right there. So that's pretty potent stuff.
Yep.
And all of them. I mean, I remember sitting on the trucks, and you're standing on the Truxton, and on the athwart ship's passageway. And they were like an S3G reactor. On the forward reactor space, right above it, that's where the passageway that goes into the into the mess deck was.
So
you're standing. So here's this athwart ship's passageway with this, you could clearly see the kind of the outline of part of the containment dome right there, or the containment vessel, and then these big signs all the way down says maximum exposure here is 6 to 8 hours per day.
Yeah.
And you're there like 3 times a day eating, working your way across the passageway. I'm thinking, so we're getting bombarded with radiation, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but you're young and dumb.
You're young
you
and
don't
dumb.
know
You
any
don't know
better.
What was funny was I had my AWO, electronic warfare officer, was also the RC reactor controls officer. So he'd actually gone to school to be an reactor controls officer. And then because it was in the 80 and we were building up to a 600 ship Navy, he wore 2 hats. So when he wasn't running the reactor, he was up with us in combat going, what the hell is it that you guys do here? I don't know. What is it you do there? He goes, well, we make power there. Well, we're looking for radars here. So he leaves his TLD in his pants one time. And big, they stamped it on everybody's lead paper to always turn your TLD in. That's a dosimeter for those of you who don't know what that is. And so he comes back from 2 weeks in Dallas and he goes, my TLD's bad. I said, from what? He goes, I left it in my stateroom. I said, so you got enough radiation from the reactor in your stateroom? And he goes, no. He goes, I know exactly what's coming out of the reactor. He goes, there's no mystery there. We got it all calculated out. We know exactly how much of gamma and neutron we're dealing with there. I says, what did it? He goes, depleted uranium. The other side of my stateroom wall is where we store the CWIS, a 20 millimeter Gatling gun ammo. He goes, it's all DU. And I was like, well, how the hell does that work? And he's like, oh, sit down. So he taught me, when DU, which we all know is depleted uranium, it's just U-238 and everything else that they decide to put in.
Yeah.
That he goes, but it's U-238, but then it's decomposing to lead, so it's all these transitionary elements as well. And he goes, so some of it's radium, and some of it's. Then he goes through the, this is the nuclide decomposure. There's a name for that. I forget what the hell it's called. And he goes, so yeah. He goes, if it was all U-238 and all brand new, so to speak, sure, it would probably just be an alpha emitter. But the fact that it's fizzing and breaking itself down it's emitting more gamma than when you get out of the reactor.
Yeah,
He goes, there's only a
gamma's
quarter inch of
dangerous.
shielding.
Yeah.
He goes, so I get more radiation sleeping than I do from being in the reactor room.
Welcome to the Navy.
I said, you got to be kidding me. He goes, no. He goes, no. He goes, I'm going to start sleeping in the reactor room.
When I was in, I took care of the film badges. That was before TLDs and pocket dosimeters. And I got a lifetime of 5 REM, all told. And I was told by the VA that that's quite a lot for somebody that was on board a ship for 4 years.
No kidding.
Yeah.
So you did get a lot of exposure.
Yeah.
And now, years later,
You pay the price.
you're paying the price.
Yeah.
Oh boy. Well, I can't wait to see what I'm going to get. Fun.
Sorry.
Hell fun. Well, thank God I didn't. It was, mostly I was a topsider, so my exposure to, I was exposed to much more asbestos than I was ever going to be exposed to radiation.
Right.
But everything in the Navy is a little bit of a, wow, I had no idea.
Right.
My berthing on the Truxton was aft. And so in our berthing space, there was this funky looking thing at an angle. And I didn't know what the hell it was when I first got on there. And I said, what's this? He goes, well, that's the dud launcher. It's an ejector. I said, wait. He goes, when the missile doesn't fire, and they sometimes don't, then they'll put the I'm serious. They put the missile launcher in the right position, and this ram comes up, and it runs it off of the rail and into the drink, onto the water on the other side of the ship. I said, you got to be bullshitting me.
Through berthing.
The guy goes, no, this is it. This is the machine that does that. When we does it, it comes out like it punches it, like a.
Wow.
I said, well, I never saw the thing work. I mean, I'm sure it does work. I just never saw it. And he goes, when you're in here, when this thing goes off, you'll know. I mean, you'll crap your pants when it goes off. And I'm like, okay, well, that's fun.
Oh, boy.
So I thought, this is the worst berthing ever. So yeah, the after cruise lounge was literally off of our berthing. After cruise head was off of our berthing. You got this dud launcher thing in it. The only saving grace was we were on the starboard side, and the starboard screw was messed up because I ran over an A6. Because when you're plane guard and you run over a plane, you didn't really guard it, you kind of ran over it. So our screw was kind of wonky. So you get up to high speed, it would shake. I mean, violently shake. And I thought, oh, I can't sleep with this until I got horizontal. And it was so loud and vibrated so much, I could count in seconds how fast I could stay awake. It was just So it turns out that heavy shaking just knocks you stupid. Anyway, I thought, well, it can't get any worse than this on this damn boat until I went on a tour of the missile house, and they showed me where all the missiles were pointed. And the whole time I'd been on that boat, you have every surface-to-air and ASROC missile pointed at your skull.
Oh, God.
The whole time. I'm like, wait a minute. I sleep back there. A guy goes, oh, Mike, if one of these things goes off, you don't have to worry about whether you're sleeping in this thing.
Last thing you worry
that's
about.
The last thing you're going to have to worry about. My last boat was an AOR, a replenishment oiler, and the other ship that was normally going to carry the ammo broke. The main spring came undone, or who the hell knows what. So they put in an SRF in the Philippines to fix it. It was the Mount Hood. And we took all their ammo on. And we pulled up to the nav mag in the Philippines, and I never dreamt that much ammo could go on anything. I was blown away at how much ammo they were going to. Took them 3 days to put on this boat. And I mean, it was stacked. I could not do it justice. And I went, that is going on here? And he goes, all that's going on here. And I went, that's a lot of ammo. And he goes, oh, he goes, you don't have to worry about it. If it ever goes off, you'll never know.
No.
Because we'll vaporize a couple of miles of ocean, and it'll be all over with. Yeah. So don't worry about it. It's all good. It's all good for us.
One less thing to worry about.
One less thing to worry about. I really appreciate you coming
My pleasure.
in here tonight. And I really, really enjoyed spending some time with you.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure for me as well.
Thanks for listening to the Half-Watt Podcast. We always want to hear from you, and we encourage you to email us at halfwattpod@gmail.com with questions or even your own stories. Funny, crazy, or praiseworthy, we want to hear it all. You can follow us on Instagram at halfwattpod to stay up to date on our feed. And be sure to subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. And share us with a friend, the best way to help us grow. The Half-Watt Podcast is a production of Now Hear This Studios.